Hi, I'm Troy Hicks. I'm a professor of English and Education at Central Michigan University. I am entering my 13th year at Central Michigan, and I'm currently in the Department of Teacher Education and Professional Development. In that department, I primarily teach courses about educational technology. I also serve as the director of our Master of Arts in Learning, Design, and Technology program and teach in our Doctorate in Educational Technology program. I also direct our Chippewa River Writing Project, which is a site of the National Writing Project. And my research interests have largely centered on writing and technology and the combination of those two, especially with digital writing and helping K-12 teachers use digital writing tools in their classrooms with their students. One of the first definitions that I encountered when I heard about digital came from my dissertation director and advisor, Nicole DeVos at Michigan State. And one of the things that she made clear was that, we've always been using our digits to create writing, and writing itself is a technology. And whether you're using a pencil or a pen or a keyboard or a mouse or a touchscreen or any other type of device, we are generally making input with these digits. And of course, now we have voice to text and other ways to do that. But the idea that writing has always been digital and will remain digital is pretty important. But to be a little more pragmatic about it and to think about where we're at in this era, and as we prepare to enter the third decade of the 21st century, and we look back at all those definitions that were evolving around the turn of the century and even through the last 5 or 6 years, the way that I think about digital, it comes down to the devices that we use and how we use them. So, are we using our smartphones, our tablets, our laptops, our desktops, other types of input devices to create either text alone, as in words and sentences and paragraphs, or are we using those devices to create images, whether they're still images or moving images? Are we then using those devices to create different types of digital compositions, which could range from podcasts, videos to infographics or social media posts, and then using those digital representations of words and ideas and circulating them in the world. So it's one thing to create it and maybe even share it with a limited audience within our classroom or with some classmates or with the teacher. But are we also inviting students to take those digital compositions and put them out in a wider circulation and inviting commentary and critique and feedback from a number of different people? So when I think digital now, I'm thinking that it can be mobile. I'm thinking that it can be fast, but I'm also thinking that it can be slow and deliberate, and we can take our time to create messages, and that we can craft them with intention and send them out in the world in a way where we're genuinely looking for that kind of feedback and reciprocity and to engage in dialogue, not just to push content out there. With digital artifacts, at risk of sounding a bit obvious, they are digital, which means that they are taggable, they are searchable, they are easily modified and shared. And I think that as a methodological stance, the way that we collect and analyze and discuss and represent those artifacts is pretty important. Journal publications no longer need to fit on, 8.5 by 11 uh, Word documents when we submit them. We can look at multimodal types of publications, ranging from journals to books and different interactive types of websites and things like that. So having things digital gives us a different type of um, lens on our inquiry. It gives us a different type of opportunity to be creative in the way that we represent our scholarship. Even though you can see here, I've still got plenty of paper and I rely on print. I'm also trying to figure out how it is that I can help my own doctoral students represent their work in a digital way and represent my own work. So, as one specific example, a manuscript that I'd been working on this year for an online journal does allow you to embed different kind of media. And traditionally, that's been embedding like a YouTube video, which could have been an interview or a screencast or something like that. What we decided to do was make an interactive timeline, and the editor of that journal was really pleased with that. Like, we've never had that before. This is really nice to use this tool. And that particular tool is also a free and openly available tool. So I think demonstrating the ways in which we can use the tools to represent our ideas, be creative, think about what it is we're trying to share, where it is we're trying to share, and how we can make that information and knowledge accessible to as broad an audience as possible. Those are all some of the things that keep me engaged as a scholar and thinking about the affordances of digital tools. Digital is in everything we do, and that's for better and for worse. So, for better, for instance, find it kind of funny, just as a quick little anecdote here in my home office. I'm very often teaching fully online now. And so, for instance, this last winter, my neighbors who are both retired would kind of joke with me, like, "What are you doing? You don't drive to campus. What are you doing?" And even on snow days, oh, yeah, I'm teaching, I'm holding Zoom meetings, I'm sharing content, I'm working with my students. So, in a very real sense, the digital is a daily part of teaching and learning. And we can see that in some very creative and unique applications. We can see teachers inviting their students to create different types of projects, whether they be podcasts or digital stories or infographics. We can see teachers using the existing content management systems in more robust ways rather than just post an assignment, have the students turn it in, or post a discussion post and have them give 3 responses to their classmates. We can see teachers where they are using the tools and having kids use the tools both inside and out of the classroom. They're making audio recordings, video recordings. They're representing their work in different ways. They're thinking about different types of evidence. They're searching library databases, but then they're also going out into their communities and taking pictures or doing interviews and collecting stories or creating surveys of their classmates in school, or moving those surveys beyond the school and then comparing those to national data sets. So I think the digital is part of what we do in teaching and learning every day. But there's also a real downside to that. And we see that a lot, at least for our kids. And my wife is a worker of all things school in this sense. So she has the app on her phone. Every time a teacher enters a grade, boom, we get a notification. Boom, we get a notification. We get automatic emails. We get updates that way. Of course, we know that the testing is moving more and more online. We know that the technology is really used to survey students in some potentially negative ways. And we also know that technology is not always as creatively used as it could possibly be. So the digital is just part and parcel of what we see in education nowadays. I think as educators, we need to be really diligent about the particular choices we make individually, and then how we can help affect institutional change, making sure that we're using those technologies in the most creative and robust ways possible. So when we think about these pressing issues, I want to share just a brief little anecdote and then follow up. One of the things I do in workshops with teachers when we get to the end and may have 5 or 10 minutes left is I'll say something like, okay, well, we've talked about these tools and these teaching strategies. What are you teaching next week? Let's try to brainstorm and be creative. And so, in fact, I was just at a conference earlier this week doing this type of thing. And often the room goes really silent. And so, for instance, this particular moment, we were talking about how we could get kids to use Adobe Spark to respond to reading. And I think the traditional response is, well, we can gather a few pictures of things that look like the characters in the book, and they can basically do a retelling or a book summary or a book talk or something like that. And I said, well, how about this? How many of your kids have a smartphone or you're at a one-to-one device? Oh yeah, they're gonna raise their hand. I'm like, well, let's do this. And one of the teachers happened to have a book. Grabbed the book. It was a picture book. Took a picture of the book, annotated the picture, uploaded it to Adobe Spark, and then said, well, now I could record my reaction to this particular book, and then I can take multiple snapshots and put this all together in this Adobe Spark video and share it that way. And again, I share that story not to brag or sound like I know so much more than everyone else, but even just that slightly different creative approach where suddenly they thought, oh, wow, we could have the kids use their devices in this way and represent their ideas in this way. That's the kind of thinking that I feel we really need to do. Unfortunately, we know professional development is not always working well in schools. We know there are examples and pockets of high quality professional development. We also know that teaching is always working the best way that it could. And I think as professionals, as teacher educators, and as researchers, we need to be providing those little types of pivots. So, where does that happen? Well, I think it happens in a couple places. Like, yes, let's think about what is kind of loosely termed app smashing, right? Like, oh, you can take your own picture of this book and import it into Adobe Spark. Okay, there's one way to do it. Oh, you can download a sound effect and add that to your podcast, or you can download a background track. Or, we could look at infographics and take data sets from a national data set and build a survey of our own students and then do a compare and contrast. So, how are we going to help other educators think more creatively? Like, yeah, it's great. You can hop on, you can make an infographic tomorrow with your students, and it can be all shiny and pretty, and it could be done in an hour, and it's lovely. But did they really understand anything more about literacy and numeracy and being critical? We can search Google Photos and we could even look for Creative Commons or public domain license photos, but do they really understand anything more about transformative use and copyright? We could look at all kinds of instances like that. So I think it's going to require us being a little bit more diligent, a little bit more creative ourselves, and then also pushing our colleagues in those more creative directions. But one final note that I would make for you as doctoral students and as people that are entering the field of literacy studies and educational technology and kind of this broad arena of education is that you need to get involved in the conversation. And I say that in the sense of everything from volunteering to host Twitter chats to participating in webinars, leading webinars, getting your voice out in conference presentations, and then building those initial ideas into articles and building those ideas into longer articles or collaborative articles, books, and things like that. I think that one of the main things that we all feel is a bit of this imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough or how I should be here or how I should position myself. I think my main focus as a scholar in the last couple years is said I try to say, how can I be humble? How can I be helpful? How can I listen and understand the participants and their needs, and whether those are teachers, pre-service teachers, in a 1 hour workshop or something I'm building a whole year-long relationship, and then how do I move them through a process of inquiry as well, so they're learning how to do the work and able to do it after I leave. And I think that's especially important with technology, and again, modeling that stance of, let's be creative. Let's try something new. Let's think about where this technology intersects with what we know about good literacy practices and the teaching of writing. How can we do this better? How can we do it a little bit different? Be that voice in the room, be active, and get connected.